Welcome to the fourth day of our tutorial titled the Ultimate Software Development class. Today, we'll be looking at cross-platform application development, as we can see from our sidebar, which shows our objective, focusing on mobile application, desktop application, and web application. From our slide, we have that a cross-platform application uses a single code base to build applications that runs on multiple platforms. Cross-platform application supports the separation of application into two stacks, which include the front-end and back-end application. The front-end is the actual cross-platform application being discussed here. The front-end is the user interface built with a single code base comprising of framework and programming language and built to run on multiple platforms. On our screen, we have a table which illustrates how a cross-platform application is built. To build a cross-platform mobile application, developers who code with JavaScript programming language uses a framework called React Native to write a single code to build application for both Android and iOS platform. While developers who code with that programming language uses a framework called Flutter to write a single code to build application for both Android and iOS platform as well. React Native and Flutter are the two most widely used and accepted framework for cross-platform mobile development. Remember that we discussed standalone application in our previous class and the framework used for mobile development. The framework used in standalone application are known as native framework, and they are still widely used as some programmers or companies still prefer developing separate applications using platform-specific framework or programming languages. To build desktop applications, developers who code with JavaScript or TypeScript programming language uses a framework known as Electron or 𝗨𝗏 to build a single application that can run on Windows, Mac, and Linux platforms. Also, developers who code with Java could use JavaFX framework for the same purpose. And lastly, developers who code with Dart can use the Flutter framework to build a single application that runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux platform. To build a web application, developers who code with JavaScript or TypeScript can use frameworks like React, Angular, and Vue to build web applications that are responsive to all devices, including mobile, tablet or iPad, and desktop devices. Though React has proven to be widely used and accepted by many programmers and companies. This means that the React framework meets most requirements for building web applications. These front-end applications then connect to a back-end application comprising of an API and database to form a complete system known as full-stack application. The back-end API can be built with a single code base as well as connect or communicate with any front-end cross-platform application, be it mobile, Android or iOS, desktop, Windows, Mac or Linux, or even web application. Developers who code with Java programming language uses a framework called Spring Boot to write a single back-end API that can communicate with the cross-platform front-end application to form a full-stack application or complete system. Developers who code with C# programming language uses a framework called ASP.NET Core to write a single back-end application that can communicate with the cross-platform front-end application to form a complete system. Also, developers who code with JavaScript uses a framework called Node.js to write a single back-end API that can communicate with the cross-platform front-end application to form a complete system. Developers who code with Python uses a framework known as the Django REST to write a single back-end application that can communicate with the cross-platform front-end application to form a complete system as well. Developers who code with PHP uses a framework known as Laravel to write a single back-end API that can communicate with the cross-platform front-end application to form a complete system. And lastly, developers who code with Go uses a framework called 𝗀 to write a single backend API that can communicate with the cross-platform front-end application to form a complete system. Each of these API could make use of one of the following database like SQLite, MySQL, PostgreSQL, or even MongoDB. Just like standalone applications, cross-platform applications has been in existence since the late 1990s and early 2000s, but widespread adoption occurred after 2010 with the rise of mobile applications and modern web technologies. It didn't explode then due to various issues such as poor UI consistency, performance issues, complex tooling, and the dominance of desktop applications. In the mid-2000s, things changed. Browsers became more powerful and JavaScript improved. Websites worked on many operating systems and the browser became a universal platform. Between 2010 and 2015, smartphones exploded, with Android in 2008 and iOS in 2007 leading the way. Companies had to build Android applications, iOS applications, web applications, which caused too much duplications, as the same product logic was repeated in different programming language and by different teams. Developers began to adopt cross-platform solutions because they save time and cost. Applications could run on many platforms and applications created delivered near-native performance. Mobile phones first adopted cross-platform applications because they exploded fastest and were the most expensive to build twice. In 2008, Adobe introduced a framework called PhoneGap, now known as Apache Cordova. It comprised of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, allowing the mobile UI to be built with these web technologies wrapped inside a native container called WebView, which then accessed device API via plugins. This was the first serious mobile cross-platform application, and it made JavaScript the first cross-platform mobile programming language. In 2015, Facebook introduced React Native, a JavaScript framework that allowed developers to render the UI of mobile applications supporting Android and iOS with real native components. React Native saw massive adoption and made JavaScript popularity explode, making mobile cross-platform development acceptable. In 2018, Google released Flutter, a UI framework that uses Dart as its programming language for logic. Dart was created by Google in 2011 as an alternative to JavaScript for web development, but its adoption was very slow. Dart gained popularity because of Flutter, while Flutter, on the other hand, used one UI for Android and iOS, just like React Native. With the introduction of React Native by Facebook in 2015, developers gained a powerful tool that allowed for the creation of mobile applications using JavaScript. Flutter, on the other hand, was designed from the beginning as a true cross-platform framework, supporting all platforms with a single code base. This means that developers could use one code base to build applications for Android, iOS, web, Windows, macOS, and even Linux platforms. As a result, Flutter not only streamlined the development process but also enhanced efficiency and consistency across multiple platforms, solidifying its position as a leading choice for modern application development. GitHub also introduced Electron, a JavaScript framework for building the UI of desktop applications. The idea was to combine web applications with Chromium, a free and open source web browser project developed by Google that served as the foundation for Google Chrome browser and provide the rendering engine for web applications. This moved web development into desktop development and supported platforms like Windows, macOS, and Linux. GitHub is a subsidiary of Microsoft since Microsoft acquired GitHub in June 2018 for $7.5 billion in Microsoft stock. Electron stands out as an excellent framework for desktop development because it empowers developers to create cross-platform applications using familiar web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, enabling them to transition to desktop application development without needing to learn a completely new set of programming language or framework. Oracle also introduced JavaFX in 2008, a Java-based framework for building desktop applications where the UI and logic are written in Java. It is a cross-platform framework that allows developers to write one Java application that runs on Windows, Mac OS, Linux using Java Virtual Machine. Flutter expanded and added Windows, Mac OS, and Linux support, making the same Flutter code work for both mobile and desktop platforms. So Flutter supports almost all platforms: Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, and even web platform. Companies like Facebook and Google created various frameworks like React, Angular, and Vue for building the UI of web applications. These frameworks use JavaScript or TypeScript for logic and run on browser installed on any device like mobile, tablet, iPad, or desktop devices, connected to the internet while being rendered by a web server. Cross-platform development evolved as companies created frameworks to reduce duplicated effort across platforms, which in turn popularized specific programming languages and accelerated API-first architectures. As app became multi-user, internet-connected, and data-heavy, the logic was shared between the UI and the back-end servers, and app became clients. Once apps were cross-platform, the UI could not own business logic, thus the backend had to be shared and API became the contrast. So developers moved to an API-first architecture, which means one backend to many clients. We have come to the conclusion of today's class, and like we always do, to test our knowledge on what we have learned in today's class, we have few questions to answer. And these questions is a continuation of the previous class we had, where we stopped at question 12. When I read through the question, all you have to do is provide the correct answer in the comment section. If the answer is C, just comment 13 C. Question 13 says, why did cross-platform application development not become popular in the early 2000s? A. Mobile devices did not exist at the time. B. Programming language were not invented yet. C. Desktop applications were banned by companies. D. Poor UI consistency, performance issues, and complex tooling. And E. Browsers could not display any content. Provide the answer in the comment section. Question 14 says, which framework first made JavaScript a serious language for mobile cross-platform application development? A. React Native. B. Flutter. C. Electron. D. PhoneGap. And E. JavaFX. This is our last question for today's class. Which statement correctly matches a cross-platform framework with its programming language and target platforms? A. Flutter, JavaScript, web only. B. React Native, that Android and iOS. C. Electron, Java, mobile application. D. JavaFX, Java, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. And E. PhoneGap, Swift, iOS only. So the question says, which statement correctly matches a cross-platform framework with its programming language and target platform? So we are looking at, first of all, the cross-platform framework, then the programming language, and finally, the platform it's supposed to run on. Provide the correct answer in the comment section. Thank you once again for staying till the end of the class. There is a lot to learn, and if you are not subscribed to the White Hat Developers, then subscribe, because this is what we are here for, to help you learn and understand the concept of software development. See you in the next class.